right, this is exciting, isn't it?
Here we go, guys, in 5, 4, 3. Here we go.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Thank you for the good programming, and I appreciate the content and really enjoyed every moment.
It's a privilege to have you on your station, and it's good stuff. It's very educational.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey, thanks for joining me this Thursday, January 9th. There are now 5 fires in the Los Angeles area. 5 fires in the Los Angeles area. Thousands of buildings have been just razed. Pacific Palisades is essentially gone. Certainly the downtown of Pacific Palisades is absolutely, it's like it's been bombed, wiped off the face of the earth. There are at least 5 people known to have died in these various fires, but nobody really knows for sure. And most of the officials say there's no way that number is going to stay at 5. Tens of thousands of acres, thousands of buildings, entire neighborhoods look like a bomb went off. It's not a situation that's getting any better in the short term. There was a break like yesterday afternoon and through the evening. The winds died down. But as the weatherman I was watching this morning said, they are going to be starting to gust again. Probably, well, that was this morning. They probably have reached that point by now. And the wind is what is spreading this fire so quickly. One reporter I watched this morning said, you can see the devastation on this side of the street, and the people on the other side of the street thought that they had escaped damage for their houses, but some of the embers from this side of the street blew over to that side of the street, and even though the wall of fire was something they escaped, the embers have set their place on fire. It's just devastating. And I can't even imagine what the final death toll is going to be. Not only are firefighters from Oregon and Washington joining those in California to help, apparently some of the firefighting equipment, especially the planes that dump water from Canada, have shown up to help. They have these special planes. I didn't realize that Canada had so many wildfires, but they have these special planes that land like on the Pacific Ocean and sort of skim the surface and collect water. And then they fly over to the fire and they dump the water. Then they go back to the ocean, skim the surface, collect water again. It was really fascinating to watch. They had some video of how these planes work and the very, very, very skilled pilots that fly them. Someone that most of the people I know out in Los Angeles, they're suffering from the really bad air quality, but most of them are not having, at least yet, to leave their homes. But not everybody. A very sweet young woman I met a few years ago, she was working on a show that my good friend was executive producing. He posted this morning that he got a call from her at 6 a.m. this morning. They had to evacuate. So this sweet young woman, her husband, and their toddler went over to my friend's apartment to stay. And yesterday afternoon, they went back to their neighborhood to discover they had no house anymore. It was completely burned. aside from the emotional toll, there's going to be an unbelievable financial toll here, a staggering financial toll. I can only imagine that the government is going to help out with low-interest loans for people. I can't imagine that anybody has enough homeowners insurance to completely rebuild, refurnish, and restock a home that looks like it was bombed. This is going to be a nightmare for months to come, months after these fires are out. This is going to be an economic disaster. And let's just cross our fingers that these winds die down and that the thousands of people fighting these fires can begin to win the day. Jimmy Carter left Washington for the last time today. His funeral at the Washington Cathedral was this morning. After the funeral, his body is going back to Plains, Georgia, where there will be another private funeral and where he will be interred next to his wife of, I believe they were married like 77 years. Whew. He apparently told one of his family members recently that he was ready to see Rosalind again. The funeral was this morning. President Biden gave the eulogy. Jimmy Carter's grandson spoke. All of the living presidents were there. The Clintons were there, sitting next to the Bushes, who were sitting next to Barack Obama, who had the lovely task of sitting next to Donald Trump and Melania. One of the CNN reporters commented on the fact that, Barack Obama was sitting next to Donald Trump and they talked a little bit, but he said the other presidents, Bush, Clinton, ignored him, didn't say a word to him. Even, their perception was that even though he was attending the funeral, he clearly was odd man out. And I got to say, Michelle Obama wasn't there. Hillary was there. Laura Bush was there. Melania was there. George Bush, as he was walking past Barack to take his seat on the other side of him, gave him kind of a bro punch. Kind of, hey, I don't know how old he is, but kind of, hey, At least it wasn't a high five, right? I do want to share with you some of what was said at the funeral. Lady B, let's start with Jason Carter. Again, this is Jimmy Carter's grandson speaking this morning at his grandfather's funeral. This isn't everything, but this is most of what Jason Carter had to say today. Listen to this.
As you've heard from the other speakers, his political life and his presidency for me was not just ahead of its time, it was prophetic. He had the courage and strength to stick to his principles even when they were politically unpopular. As governor of Georgia half a century ago, he preached an end to racial discrimination and an end to mass incarceration. As president in the 1970s, as you've heard, he protected more land than any other president in history. 50 years ago, he was a climate warrior who pushed for a world where we conserved energy, limited emissions, and traded our reliance on fossil fuels for expanded renewable sources. By the way, he cut the deficit, wanted to decriminalize marijuana, deregulated so many industries that he gave us cheap flights and, as you heard, craft beer. Basically, all of those years ago, he was the first millennial. And he could make great playlists, as we've heard as well. Maybe this is unbelievable to you, but in my 49 years, I never perceived a difference between his public face and his private one. He was the same person no matter who he was with or where he was. And for me, that's the definition of integrity. That honesty was matched by love, it was matched by faith. And in both public and private, my grandparents did fundamentally live their lives in an effort, as the Bible says, to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with their God. Sometimes I feel and felt like I shared my grandfather with the world. Today is one of those days. But really, he shared the world with me. The power of an atom, the beauty and complexity of a South Georgia forest. When we fished, he celebrated the majesty of everything from the smallest minnow to that grand circulation of waters. And he shared this love with my boys, taking these Atlanta public school kids out into the fields to show them about row crops and wild plums. In the end, his life is a love story. And of course, it's a love story about Jimmy and Rosalind and their 77 years of marriage and service. As the song says, they were the flagship of the fleet. And rest assured that in these last weeks, he told us that he was ready to see her again. But his life was also a broader love story about love for his fellow humans and about living out the commandment to love your neighbor as yourself. I believe that love is what taught him and told him to preach the power of human rights, not just for some people, but for all people. It focused him on the power and the promise of democracy, its love for freedom, its requirement and founding belief in the wisdom of regular people raising their voices, and the requirement that you respect all of those voices, not just some. That conviction made him a naval officer who believed and demonstrated, as you've heard, that the greatest power of America was not the military, but its values. And those values were personal to him, and he lived them both publicly and privately. As you heard Stu say, as president, he gave voice to dissidents, stood up to dictators, brought countries together in peace. His heart broke for the people of Israel. It broke for the people of Palestine, and he spent his life trying to bring peace to that holy land. And he talked about it at the dinner table. It was the same in public as it was in private.
Jimmy Carter, the same in public as he was in private. A man of character, a man of faith. There is a picture which I think is really interesting in the Washington Post. It is a still frame of Jimmy Carter's flag-draped coffin being escorted by various military members out of the cathedral. And the picture was snapped just as the coffin was walked by the presidents, and you can see the former vice presidents were in the third row. You can see Mike Pence and his wife. Jill and Joe Biden have their hands over their heart as the coffin goes by. Kamala Harris and Doug Emhoff have their hands over their heart as the coffin goes by. Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton have their hands over their heart as the coffin goes by. Laura Bush is a little bit blocked by Joe Biden, so I can't tell for sure, but George Bush has his hand over his heart. Barack Obama has his hand over his heart. Mike Pence and his wife have their hands over their heart. Want to know who didn't acknowledge the coffin's passing in any discernible way in this photograph? Donald Trump and Melania. Donald Trump is standing there with his chin raised. You know, that kind of semi-belligerent look he gets? I don't know. Maybe he was trying to keep himself awake because, you know, he has a tendency to drift off. And Melania just looks at the coffin with at least an appropriately somber expression. But when everyone around you is acknowledging this in a particular way, isn't it weird? I mean, I guess when, you know, he said something, Trump said something the other day about, well, you know, he admired Carter as a man, but didn't think much of his presidential legacy. So maybe in his mind, he didn't want to put his hand over his heart to what? Make it seem like he respected him more than he did? Maybe nobody told him, hey, by the way, Don, you know, when the coffin goes by, most people show their respect. Not Donald Trump. Everyone in this photo is showing respect to the coffin as it goes by. Donald Trump is standing there with his chin raised. Melania by his side. Okay. The text line has been, you know, we always, for the first hour of the show, we open up the phone lines and the text lines. Lady B, why don't you go ahead and open up the phone lines now? We had them closed. We thought we were maybe going to be getting a call from somebody who was at the funeral, but that doesn't seem to have happened. So let's just open the phone lines up to listeners, Lady B. I've already been getting a lot of your texts. Somebody texted in that Jason Carter graduated from Evanston Township High School. I don't have independent verification of that, but maybe we can Evanston. Maybe we can get Daniel Biss to weigh in on that. And other people were asking about the wildfires. You know, my daughter, as I've mentioned, lives in the Los Angeles area. She is extending. For the second time, she's extended her holiday visit with us because she lives in a place where there isn't an immediate fire, but where she lives is surrounded by fires. She talked to her roommate. Her roommate said that they have not been ordered to evacuate, but they have been told to pack a bag and have it by the front door in case that changes. And the air quality is just horrible. Just horrible. And the smoke from these fires is considered toxic smoke because this isn't just a wildfire in parkland or out in the forest where it's all just wood smoke, which actually is bad enough for people's lungs. These are house fires. And all the plastic and all the chemicals that have been inside these houses and they're burning up. They create a toxic smoke. CNN the other day had a list of like 4 toxic chemicals that have already been determined to be in the smoke. What I'm going to do is up until in about another 3-4 minutes, we're going to take a break. And I'm going to read texts and take your calls till then. And after we come back from the break, we have President Biden's remarks today in full. It's not very long. It's about 10 minutes or so. And when we come back on the other side of this break, I will set that up for you, and then we're going to listen to Joe Biden. I know on the text line some of you have reached out to me and said that you thought CPT should have carried the funeral live. I don't have anything to do with those decisions. I will pass along your comments, but after we take a break, I will be bringing you President Biden's remarks in full. Until then, let's go to the phone lines. Jim is on the line from Chicago. Hey, Jim. How are you?
Hi, Joe. Good. I was just thinking about how the fondness I had for the 70s. The last year when I voted for Jimmy Carter, it was my last year of school, and I left school with no student debt. I could afford any apartment with 1 week's pay anywhere the Tony's neighborhoods in the city. Homelessness was I didn't even hear of it in conversation. And I thought we were on our way. And along comes Ronald Reagan with that Darwinian theory of Milton Friedman from the University of Chicago. The capitalists, the most succeeding capitalists are the king of the mountain. That's what we're shooting for. Everybody should be a lunatic capitalist. But I wasn't a human credit score back then, Joe. And I also enjoyed the absence of the internet. I didn't realize there were so many lunatics. Look at
I know.
The guy
and they're breeding.
Facebook.
They're breeding other lunatics.
They're breeding
like rabbits.
lunatics.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and we're inundated with insanity. How about the nut that's building the compound down in Florida? What do you expect? Zuckerberg, who said, I'm not going to fact check anything. You want to talk crazy on the internet?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead and do it.
Yeah, you want to do hate speech against gay people? Well,
right.
I think, yeah. Somebody was commenting, I saw on cable news, somebody said, they used to call it content moderation. Now Zuckerberg calls it a lack of free speech. Denying free speech, and it's the same thing.
Yeah, sure it is. Sure, we believe that.
Mm-hmm.
But what is done to the body politic is that we can't. Who knows? It will take generations to come to grips with it. But I think about forward-thinking President Carter was. He put more racially diverse. And regardless of their religion or whatever their circumstances were, he put them on as judges. He put more women into positions of authority, decision-making. He was so far ahead of his time, it was ridiculous. And as you said, the forest fire in California, maybe it couldn't have been if Jimmy would have got a second term. But I guarantee you, we would have let climate scientists at least get on the internet or get on somewhere on public television and explain how we can mitigate some of these disasters. Think about the money, Joan. I mean, my God, we don't have
the dollar figure to rebuild these neighborhoods.
Oh, my God.
I mean, heck, Jim, just the Malibu beach houses alone, what were those, like 10, 20 million a piece? I mean, you're looking at $1 billion right there. Of course, hopefully those are the folks who have enough money to rebuild as opposed to some of the other folks. Oh, Jim, I got to get to the break.
I know you do.
Thank you so much for calling.
Thank you, Joan.
We are going to be right back with much more right after this.
Podcasts of Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and Amazon. Just search for Joan Esposito.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Want to join the conversation?
I just wanted to thank your station for consistently reporting the facts. In a world of clickbait headlines, your station is who I trust for the real news.
Call Joan now at 773-763-9278 and join the conversation. Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820.
Well, I got a text from one of our regular texters, Eleanor, who's in the south suburbs, and she said that as President Carter's coffin casket was entering the cathedral, Donald Trump put his hand on his belly. And then she's speculating that for the exit of the casket, he was probably just too tired to lift his hand up again. Oh, well, you know, everybody else found the energy to put their hands over their hearts. But I guess it's what it is, and it's what we better get used to. That's what Bobby from Indiana is on the line to say. Hey, Bobby, how are you today?
Hello, Joan. I hope you're managing to stay away from that COVID in the house.
Well, so far so good, but I'm really, I got to say, I'm pretty nervous about it. I mean, it's like he's in Sing Sing, we just slip food in, we slip medicine in, and then we run away. So let's hope Ray gets better fast. He's actually a pretty sick cookie, I gotta say.
Yeah, well, I hope him well too, and that it stays away from you, and I hope you're a little Joan out in California, wherever she is safe from all that fire.
Oh, she has extended her stay. She came home for the holidays, and she has extended her stay because her roommate is telling her it's not to come back. I mean, it's such a mess. So she is still here, good, safe at home for another few days.
That's good. Well, I told this to your little cohort in the evening, Patty, that I think now, for the next however many eons, that what's going to be our albatross in the White House, that we should not honor him on WCPT on any of our shows, at least our local shows and hosts like you and Patty and all, Richard, and you name it, by calling him President or Donald Trump or anything like that. According to Hal Sparks, he really hates being called just Donald. And I would say that that's what you do. Mm-hmm. Call him Donald or call him Donnie, or my personal, because he always loves to bring up his German heritage. I call him Donnie von Poopstains, and you can pick something, but never call him. Never
who's really good at coming up with silly names for people is Stephanie Miller. I haven't heard if she's. And sometimes for somebody like Trump, it wouldn't surprise me if she came up with a bunch of different names and just rotated through them. There's one newsletter that I read.
She's had some she's been using for quite some time now. And like I say, use some of hers or whatever. But
yeah.
Never, and I would never use president in it. That'll rile him.
Couldn't happen to a nicer guy.
Yeah, I tell you.
Yeah.
And the way he's talking about the, now when people need help, like you say, we don't know how many have died. And
well, somebody pointed out, Bobby, and one of the texters pointed out, how Donald Trump doesn't like to provide federal funds to areas where he thinks they didn't vote for him. Thank goodness Joe Biden is still the president, and Joe Biden better make sure that all of the federal relief that California needs is in place and irrefutable by the time he leaves office, because Hollywood is, for the most part, not 100%, but a lot of Hollywood is very Democratic. There are certainly lots of exceptions, so I understand that. But, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, I don't think he could out and out refuse to provide aid to California, but he certainly could drag the process out and make people miserable for a longer period of time. And he's perfect. We know he's capable of that. He didn't want it. He's already gone on record. When Orange County, California needed disaster relief, he wanted to hold it up until one of his aides said, Mr. Trump, Orange County is very Republican. They actually voted overwhelmingly for you. And then he was like, oh, okay, well, then let's make sure they get all the relief they need. Yeah, fine human being. Fine human being.
He's made already over the past day or two about this, and his nasty little nickname for the governor out there, and that's the best he could do is disparage their governor.
Yeah. He's not a big person. I mean, he may be 6 feet tall, but he's not a man of character.
No qualities to be holding that office. Not one. So,
no. Thanks, Bobby. Thanks so much for the call. Okay. Always a pleasure to hear from you. Lady B, let's real quick take one more call. Ed from Palos Park, and then I'm going to go to the Carter speech today. So, Ed, are you there?
Yeah. Hey, Joan.
Hey, how are you?
Great. Joan, I wanted to comment what you said at the ceremony today to farewell to Jimmy Carter, that Trump never had his hand on his heart. Reason being, he doesn't possess a heart.
Oh, okay. I see. He didn't know where it was. I see.
And, yes. He is totally morally incompetent and whatever, but we know all that. In regards to this Alito having a private conversation with him, that is absolutely inappropriate. It's against the ethics of the Supreme Court.
Such as they are.
That bulletin themselves. So he's doing a contradiction, from his own court there by doing that. And I don't know, where is the outrage? Well, I know Jamie Raskin wrote something calling that out for what it is. But, there's got to be more outrage about him. And I was even wondering, with the time left for Joe Biden, is there anything that he could possibly do to hold back some of these horrible things that Trump is projecting? I know he's going to offer pardons or whatever, but a lot of these people that he's thinking of pardoning, they don't want him because they're saying they did nothing wrong. And I agree
that was what
that.
Adam Kinzinger said when he was with Stephen Colbert. He said he doesn't want a pardon. Doesn't want a pardon. Yes. And if it means he ends up in jail, he said, then from jail I will continue to make Donald Trump's life as difficult as I possibly can. Even if I end up in jail, you're not going to shut me up.
For sure.
Yeah.
I really admire someone that has that kind of courage to do that. Also, this Greenland thing, I'm hearing that this is nothing but a distraction.
Yeah, you're
That's
absolutely
not
right.
Happen. Yeah.
He doesn't. He knows how to manipulate the media. He knows how to wave red meat, to distract them from whatever story he doesn't want them to cover.
Yes.
Anyway, Ed, I gotta wrap this up because I want to make sure I have time to share. After we do the Jimmy Carter eulogy given by President Biden this morning, in what time we have left up until 3, I will take calls again. Ed, thanks for the call. I want to, any other callers who are on the line, if you want to hang on, I will get to you after this. But part of the reason, aside from the fact that Jimmy Carter warrants us listening to his eulogy by the President of the United States, it's probably one of the last times we'll see, Joe Biden making such a lengthy appearance that is covered by national media. I mean, he certainly hasn't been doing press conferences or popping into the press room, but he had very gracious and very pointed remarks to make about Jimmy Carter, and he kept it all focused on Jimmy Carter. But I think if you read between the lines, there is a bit of Biden commentary on the political situation we find ourselves in at this moment. See if you can pick up those references. This is President Biden's eulogy for Jimmy Carter that he gave at the Washington National Cathedral this morning. Listen to this.
Leaders of the clergy, distinguished guests, most importantly, the Carter family. In April 2021, Jill and I visited Jimmy and Rosalind on a warm spring day down in Plains, Georgia. We wanted to see them. Rosalind met us at the front door with her signature smile. Together, we entered a home that they had shared for almost 77 years of marriage. An unassuming red brick ranch home that reflects their modesty more than any trappings of power. We walked into the living room where Jimmy greeted us like family. That day, just the four of us sat in the living room and shared memories that spanned almost 6 decades. A deep friendship that started in 1974. I was a 31-year-old senator, and I was the first senator outside of Georgia, maybe the first senator, to endorse his candidacy for president. It was an endorsement based on what I believe is Jimmy Carter's enduring attribute: character, character, character. Because of that character, I believe is destiny. Destiny in our lives, and quite frankly, destiny in the life of the nation. It's an accumulation of a million things built on character that leads to a good life in a decent country. Life of purpose, life of meaning. Now, how do we find that good life? What does it look like? What does it take to build character? Do the ends justify the means? Jimmy Carter's friendship taught me, and through his life taught me, the strength of character is more than title or the power we hold. It's the strength to understand that everyone should be treated with dignity, respect, that everyone, and I mean everyone, deserves an even shot. Not a guarantee, but just a shot. You know, we have an obligation to give hate no safe harbor and to stand up to what my dad used to say is the greatest sin of all, the abuse of power. That's not about being perfect, because none of us are perfect. We're all fallible. But it's about asking ourselves, are we striving to do things, the right things, What values? What are the values that animate our spirit? Do we operate from fear or hope, ego or generosity? Do we show grace? Do we keep the faith when it's most tested? For keeping the faith with the best of humankind and the best of America is a story, in my view, from my perspective, Jimmy Carter's life. A story of a man, to state the obvious, you've heard today some great eulogies, who came from a house without running water or electricity and rose to the pinnacle of power. The story of a man who was at once driven and devoted to making real the words of his Savior and the ideals of this nation. The story of a man who never let the tides of politics divert him from his mission to serve and shape the world. The man had character. Jimmy held a deep Christian faith in God, and that his candidacy spoke and wrote about. Faith as a substance of things hoped for and evidence of the things not seen. Faith founded on commandments of Scripture. Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy mind and all thy soul, and love thy neighbor as thyself. Easy to say, but very, very difficult to do. In his life, in this life, any walk of faith can be difficult. It can be lonely, but it requires action to be the doers of the world. But in that commandment lies the essence, in my view, found in the gospel, found in many faith traditions, and found in the very idea of America. Because the very journey of our nation is a walk of sheer faith. To do the work, to be the country we say we are, to be the country we say we want to be. A nation where all are created equal in the image of God and deserve to be treated equally throughout our lives. We've never fully lived up to that idea of America. We've never walked away from it either because of patriots like Jimmy Carter. Throughout his life, he showed us what it means to be a practitioner of good works and a good and faithful servant of God and of the people. And today, many think he was from a bygone era. But in reality, he saw well into the future. A white Southern Baptist who led on civil rights. A decorated Navy veteran who brokered peace. A brilliant nuclear engineer who led on nuclear nonproliferation. A hardworking farmer who championed conservation and clean energy. And a president who redefined the relationship with a vice president. Jimmy and I often talked about our dear friend Walter Mondale, whom we all miss very much. Together, they formed a model partnership of collaboration and trust, because both were men of character. And as we all know, Jimmy Carter also established a model post-presidency by making a powerful difference as a private citizen in America. And, I might add, as you all know, around the world. Through it all, he showed us how character and faith start with ourselves and then flows to others. At our best, we share the better parts of ourselves: joy, solidarity, love, commitment. Not for reward, but in reverence for the incredible gift of life we've all been granted. To make every minute of our time here on earth count. That's the definition of a good life. A life Jimmy Carter lived during his 100 years. To young people, to anyone in search of meaning and purpose, study the power of Jimmy Carter's example. I miss him, but I take solace in knowing that he and his beloved Rosalind are reunited again. And to the entire Carter family, thank you, and I mean this sincerely, for sharing them both with America and the world. We love you all. Jill and I will cherish our visits with them, including that last one in their home. We saw Jimmy as he always was, at peace, with a life fully lived, a good life, a purpose and meaning, of character, driven by destiny, and filled with the power of faith, hope, and love. I'll say it again, faith, hope, and love. As he returned to Plains, Georgia, for his final resting place, we can say goodbye in the words of the prophet Micah, who Jimmy so admired until his final breath. Jimmy Carter did justly, loved mercy, walked humbly. May God bless a great American, a dear friend, and a good man. May he be raised up on eagle's wings and bear you on the breath of dawn and make you to shine like the sun and hold you in the palm of his hand. God bless you, Jimmy Carter.
That was President Joe Biden delivering the eulogy today for Jimmy Carter, 39th president. Jimmy Carter's body has been returned to Georgia. There will be a private family funeral and a private family internment this afternoon. Let us go back to the phone lines. Dave from Hoffman Estates is on the line.
Hey, Joan. I'm going to coattail first on your last caller, Ed, with about that Alito and Trump. Remember back on how the Republicans whined when Clinton was talking with then AG Loretta Lynch?
Oh, yeah.
On that tarmac in Phoenix that time? Mm-hmm. You know, so next time if they start whining about this, just might have to remind them about that.
Yeah.
But what I was going to talk on that fire, I heard this morning, I read too, on that where State Farm had announced in April of 2024, last year, that they would have canceled a total of 72,000 policies in the state for houses and apartments, 30,000 of which were homes, according to State Farm. About 1,600 insured homes in the Pacific Palisades lost coverage because of the decision.
There has been an insurance, what they describe as an insurance crisis out in California. And I'm sure, you know, a lot of places in Florida have discovered that no company wants to give them like flood or hurricane insurance anymore. How much you want to bet that any kind of pre-existing homeowners coverage for fires goes very quietly away after this?
Yeah, because that move, it said it came 9 months after State Farm announced it wouldn't issue new homeowners policies in California. So I don't know. You think this CEO and that's going to be sleeping with one eye open?
Oh God! No. Probably a lot of them reportedly are these days. But at least, you know, this is such a big disaster that the federal government will step in. So hopefully I mean, people are still, can you imagine, I have homeowners insurance. Does it really cover the value if I had to replace everything in this house? Heck no. Heck no. I mean, how many of us even have like an inventory? If you walked away and your home burned to the ground, could you even remember everything you had in it? I don't think I could. Yeah, not that my memory is anything to brag about, but I don't think I could.
Well, and I kind of tongue-in-cheek, I told Patty last night on that thing, I hope the hell it wasn't PG&E again having another...
Oh, God. The
Mustang company.
Utility company out there that was responsible for one of the previous bad fires.
Yeah, in Maui.
Yeah, I don't know. This has been such a big... this has been such a big disaster. I wonder if they'll ever really be able to figure out how it or where the origin was or how it originated. Because there's already speculation that they'll never know for sure. Yeah,
and I know Trump is sitting there trying to point the finger at the governor and at Biden. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That he's amazing. Well, listen, let me clear off so somebody else can get it. All right, thanks for taking the call.
Thank you. David is on the line from San Francisco. David, we're down to about a minute left, but I wanted to make sure I got you on the air today. Thanks for calling.
Oh, thanks, Joan. Yeah, and I was just going to raise one of Trump's newest scams is that he wants to turn American gold into Bitcoin.
Oh, God.
I've gotten on a whole bunch of right-wing stations. They're always advertising the gold. Oh, America's about to crash, buy gold.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, those people are going to have to decide whether that gold that they're buying is going to be all of a sudden transferred into some fly-by-night Bitcoin cyber currency.
Well, he used to say bad things about Bitcoin, but I read an article before the election that there were 2 or 3 of the tech bro billionaires that have so much money invested in Bitcoin that they would either lose hundreds of millions of dollars if it continued to disappear the way it was, or unless they could convince Trump to support it, then they stood to make hundreds of millions of dollars in profit.
Right. Yeah, turn that gold into Bitcoin. And what's even uglier is that they'd be forcing. Trump is proposing paying off the national debt with Bitcoin. Now, if you look at your dollar bill, it says for all debts, public and private. And when you buy a Treasury note, you expect to be paid back in U.S. dollars. But then all of a sudden, if he's going to claim that the Treasury notes are no longer backed by U.S. dollars, but that the holders of Treasury notes are going to have to accept Bitcoin, I think there'd be a little squealing in the world. And especially since, when you think about a real conservative, slow and steady is a real conservative.
There you go. David, we've got the computer is going to take us to news pretty shortly. Thank you so much for the call. We are going to do news. We're going to be back with much more right after this.
Remember when you get to work to hop over to WCPT820.com or the TuneIn Radio app and stream The Stephanie Miller Show. Weekdays 8 to 11 a.m. on Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. Hey, Google, play WCPT.
Streaming Chicago's Progressive Talk from TuneIn.
Time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Joan, as always, exceptional work from you. From, your TV days all the way up to the day. You're truly exceptional, and thanks for this great show you have.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
I am very pleased to be joined by Michael O'Connor, who is the political correspondent at Dogwood, which is another Courier newsroom publication. It is about all things going on in the state of Virginia. Michael, how are you? Happy New Year.
Hey, good to be here.
We from time to time pay attention to things that your governor, Glenn Youngkin, does or is about to do, or we're afraid he's going to do, or but maybe it's my imagination, but it seems to me that he hasn't been at least so much in the national news as of late. Tell me what is going on with Glenn Youngkin.
Well, he's just right now in Virginia. He's entering his last year in office as a governor. He can't run again because our state constitution forbids governors from running, for successive terms. The General Assembly session is getting underway. Our lawmakers are returning to the Capitol, and with divided government, there's not as much that can be done. He recently proposed some budget amendments, so there's going to be some debate about that. More recently, tonight he's actually heading to Mar-a-Lago with other Republican governors to meet with President-elect Trump. That's kind of what's going on with him, I guess.
Will you or will there be any kind of media going along with your governor? Any chance that you're going to be hanging out Mar-a-Lago? You could give us like a live man on the street kind of, it's not as shiny on the inside as you would expect kind of reporting?
No, this event is closed to the press. So we'll just have to see maybe what people tweet out or post about their visit.
What do you think politically Mr. Youngkin is going to be doing in the future? Is he done with political life? Is he thinking 2028?
That's a big question for sure. As I mentioned, he's got 12 months to go as governor, and so it's not hard to imagine him potentially taking a job in the Trump administration, while he's still in office. There's talk that maybe he could try to run for U.S. Senate because our Democratic Senator Mark Warner is up for re-election in 2026. And of course, there was a lot of chatter about his presidential ambitions this last cycle.
Yeah, it was like he was positioning himself, at least the way the reporting that I read told the story, he was positioning himself to be kind of a stealth candidate. Like if Donald Trump imploded and they needed somebody to step in and pick up the pieces while he was going to be ready, and then that never happened.
Yeah, Trump never imploded, so I guess there wasn't really a need to look for a replacement. And, Governor Youngkin was certainly a champion for Trump. He rallied with him here in Virginia. Youngkin spoke at the Republican National Convention. And, after he won, he's just always been just most recently, he's been, a very vocal supporter on cable television, which, when he ran for governor, he kind of ran a Trump-adjacent campaign. It wasn't like a full-throated support of him in 2021, but it wasn't necessarily a rejection of him by any means.
It was like he was walking a tightrope. I didn't know whether to admire it or be disgusted by it.
Well, it was a different time, I think, in terms of Trump's popularity. And I think, Virginia is definitely more purple than it was back then. I think, Virginia rejected Trump again in 2024, but to a lesser extent than they did in 2016. And there's new polling out today showing that Virginia voters are pretty much split on Trump with 47%. Yeah, 47% have a favorable view of him, and 47% have an unfavorable view of him, according to this poll that came out of Emerson College today.
Now, when a poll like that is done, do they delve into, okay, you have a favorable impression, why, what is it about him you like? Or you have an unfavorable impression of Trump, what is it about him you don't like? Do we get that kind of second layer of information?
That wasn't part of the release today, unfortunately. Maybe for additional context, 43% have a favorable view of Biden, while 50% had an unfavorable view of him. So,
yeah. Interesting. Well, Glenn Youngkin seems to really, correct me if you think I'm wrong, he seems to enjoy political life. So I would imagine that even after his tenure is up, that he will find another way to try to stay in some kind of office. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be surprising for him to leave political life. I mean, he has a pretty strong favorability rating here in Virginia. I mean, it's 48%, which is better than Trump. And as you mentioned, he certainly made a name for himself nationally, and it'd be surprising if he walked away, but it's hard to know right now. He certainly hasn't indicated one way or the other.
Interesting. I know that we're focusing on all of these fires out in California, but there was in Virginia. Didn't you have a bunch of damage from severe snowstorms?
Yes, there was some snowstorms that took place in Virginia, and in Richmond, it impacted the water supply so much so that thousands of people were without water and power, and it delayed the business of our state lawmakers. It's kind of early days in terms of what exactly went wrong. I think there's going to be an after-action report, but that I think people have talked about how the infrastructure in Richmond is very old. I think it's 100 years old, so there's a need to invest in the infrastructure. There was complaints about the communications from the mayor. And there's new reporting out today just about how, this could have been prevented. Were there things that could have been done leading up to this to improve the infrastructure that just weren't done? But it's a very fluid situation. And I really want to give credit to the local reporters in Richmond who have been doing a great job of covering this.
Wow. Would that be the state legislature's fault for not paying attention to infrastructure improvements, or would it be a private sector issue?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, it's cities.
Or will we let the courts decide that when the lawsuits come?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly there's been talk about the state funding more for local infrastructure, but it's hard. It's there's also the locality's job to invest in its infrastructure, so it's kind of hard to parse out who exactly would be to blame there.
I'm speaking to Michael O'Connor, who's the political correspondent at Dogwood, which is the courier publication of all the news of Virginia. We are going to take a break, and when we come back, I want to talk to Michael about some of the legislative priorities and some state constitutional amendments that are moving forward in Virginia. We'll be right back after this.
There's no excuse to miss Joan Esposito.
It's number one on my stereo.
Live, local, and progressive. You can listen to her daily at WCPT820.com on your computer or phone. Chew's Views with Richard Chew.
Devin and Henry and Alex do such a great job for me and our show. And then, of course, there's Lady B and there's Paul and all the rest. You know, they have to sit a lot. They've got to manage boards in here. They've got to go back to the other engineering room. And I've oftentimes said these guys, you know, they get around on roller skate. But I looked up and Devin was shaking his leg. And I was like, you all right, man? He's like, yeah, you know, leg kind of fell asleep. Because I thought he was over there doing a stanky leg dance.
Richard Chew, weekday mornings at 6.
WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm talking to Michael O'Connor, who's the political correspondent at Dogwood, which is the Virginia Courier Newsroom publication. Michael, I know that there are 2 or 3 constitutional amendments. Could you talk about those and where they stand?
Sure. So there's 3 constitutional amendments that Democrats are pursuing right now. One has to do with enshrining reproductive rights in our state constitution. One has to do with improving voting rights, and one has to do with marriage equality. Now, the way constitutional amendments work in Virginia is they have to pass the state house with a majority. There has to be an election for the members of the state house, and then it has to pass again in the state house, and then go to the voters for their approval. So it's important to note the governor doesn't get involved in the situation, and so Governor Glenn Youngkin, who has vetoed a lot of legislation over the years, can't get in the way of Democrats who have control of the General Assembly here in advancing the first kind of step this session, which is just to pass the resolutions related to these constitutional amendments. As I mentioned, the one related to reproductive rights would just add into our Constitution that people have the rights to the full spectrum of reproductive health care. Advocates are really keen to make people understand this isn't just about, the right to an abortion, but it's also protecting the rights to the full spectrum of reproductive health care, because it just kind of seems like a lot of folks in the post kind of Roe world, in addition to going after things like abortion, conservatives are cracking down on access to contraception and things like that. So Democrats want to make sure this full spectrum of reproductive health care is protected in our state constitution. On the voting rights issue, in Virginia, when a person is convicted of a felony, they get their right to vote taken away, and they can only get it back after they've served their time and they make a request to the governor to give it back to them. I think this is pretty rare for a state to have that kind of system, and the constitutional amendment would make it a more standardized way for these people to get their voting rights back after they serve their time. It wouldn't be up to the whims of the governor. It would just be a more standard process with more transparency. And finally, on the marriage equality amendment, as you know, of course, the law of the land is that same-sex marriage is legal, and so any state-level laws that would outlaw it are null and void. Unfortunately, in Virginia, we still have language in our state constitution defining marriage as between a man and a woman. And so this amendment would strip that language out. So in the event that, the federal law changed, at the state level here in Virginia, it wouldn't revert back to this definition of marriage between a man and a woman. We would have language on the books affirming that it's just between two adults. And it's a sore spot, for people that ugly language is still in our state constitution. And so getting rid of it is just another way of recognizing that, every adult can love who they want and, support gay rights.
have the voters had the opportunity to weigh in on this? And if not, when will that happen?
Not yet. It's actually a 2-year process. So this is the first step, getting these resolutions related to these constitutional amendments passed. This year is the first step. They'll eventually have to be passed a second time in the State House, and then at that point, they would go to the voters for a referendum. So I think that would put us at 2026 when 2027 when they could be on the ballot.
Wow. Well, with Donald Trump taking office January 20th, that might not be, that timeline might not work.
Well, it's just the way our state constitution works. So,
we're all of us are kind of reacting after the fact. I remember here in Illinois, we had a number, when Roe v. Wade was still the law of the land, we had a number of outdated laws on the books that had to do with abortion. You know how when Roe v. Wade fell and suddenly Wisconsin was looking at an 1849 law that suddenly took effect. And we had, I really attribute it to the work not just of one man, but largely because of a guy by the name of Terry Cosgrove. He went to Springfield. He fought tirelessly to get these old laws, like a woman having to get her husband's permission and stuff like that. And he would tell people that we needed to get these laws off the books. And they'd be like, oh, Terry, Roe v. Wade's the law of the land. It's not going anywhere. And he'd be like, we can't count on that. And his philosophy and his belief was, no matter what you think, you're one election away from things being different. And he pushed, and we got all these things rescinded and removed. And then suddenly Dobbs came, and Roe v. Wade was no longer. And, Illinois was in a very good position. We didn't have to go back and try to scour off some of these old laws on the book. It's really hard, especially when you're trying to look forward to what might be the worst case scenario. I mean, great. It would have been great if, Virginia legislators 2 or 3 years ago said, some of this stuff that we really believe in, and maybe we should, make sure that this is, part of the state constitution. But most people, unless you have somebody who's that voice crying in the wilderness, most of us are like, oh, my gosh, this is in danger. Oh, we better protect it. OK, it's going to take a year or two. Well, we are where we are.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think to Virginia Democrats' defense here, I think they have been trying to do so. I think, but it kind of precedes my time a little bit. But I know that this has kind of been a year or so in the making. So it's been in the works. But
stuff isn't fast.
It would. Say again?
Stuff doesn't happen fast, especially not at the legislative level.
Yeah, and especially when you're trying to, this is trying to change the state constitution, which people, understandably take seriously. So it is kind of a slower process, but if and when it passes, it will be a big deal. These will be strong protections for folks.
You were talking, we've got time for this. You were talking about the fact that Glenn Youngkin is term limited out as governor. Let's talk about the two people who it appears are most likely to go up against one another to replace him.
Yeah. So on the Democratic, the only Democratic declared candidate is former Representative Abigail Spanberger. She is a kind of a moderate Democrat. She's relatively, popular. She's done well electorally. She has a reputation for being a really strong fundraiser, and she's got a reputation for being, a very bipartisan kind of congresswoman when she was on the Hill. And then on the Republican side, we have our current Lieutenant Governor, Winsome Earl Sears, who is the only declared Republican candidate. As I mentioned, she's our lieutenant governor. She's kind of garnered some controversy over the years. She misgendered one of our state senators, one of our only trans state senators, and she's aligned herself with sort of the Christian evangelical movement, and so there was a poll that came out today showing basically a very tight race, a slight edge to Spanberger, just 1 point. But, as I mentioned, Virginia is proving itself to be a purple state. And so it'll be a competitive race in 2025.
So what do you think what will this race turn on? Will it be the agenda of Christian evangelicals versus something that's perceived as progressive? Is that what it's going to? Is that the conflict that's going to be talked about in this race?
That's tough to say. I mean, I think a big factor will be the economy. I was talking to a political scientist about this today, and Trump is going to assume office this month, and what he does over the next 10 months to shape the national economy, the state economy, will obviously play a big role in whether or not voters want to change in which party is in office. Something people in Virginia are really watching closely is his proposal to cut the federal government. Virginia has one of the, if not the largest federal workforces in the country, and so if he ends up going through with that, it could have a big impact on the Northern Virginia economy, which could hurt a Republican candidate. So in terms of what narrative kind of emerges, I think it just depends on how Spanberger and Earl Sears position themselves for voters. Does Spanberger, kind of try to claim a progressive mantle, or does she try to woo sort of these moderate voters who are kind of up for grabs? And then, Earl Sears, it's hard to imagine her not fully embracing Trump in this day and age, given his popularity with conservative voters. But we'll just kind of have to see what his popularity is like, 10 months into his second term in office.
Yeah, whether it behooves her to make that connection or not. Michael, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to find out what's going on in states outside of our own. Michael he's the political writer for Dogwood, which is all the news of Virginia. You can find it online. Michael O'Connor, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much.
We are going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to be joined by Russell Berman, who's a staff writer at the Atlantic Monthly Magazine. We'll be right back after this.
Take Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, with you on the go by using the TuneIn app on your phone. Just search for WCPT 820.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Before he became a staff writer at The Atlantic, Russell Berman covered Congress for the Hill newspaper, was a correspondent for the New York Sun. And in that time, he's written extensively about Congress, political reform, and policy experiments in the states and sometimes in the cities. He has, for the last couple of months, been writing articles that we are talking about on a daily basis. Donald Trump, Mike Johnson, President Elon Musk, and other good things. Russell is here, and I hope we can talk about as much of his writing as we can squeeze in the next half hour. Russell, how are you? Happy New Year.
I'm well. Happy New Year.
It is such a great honor to be talking to you. I really admire the work you do and that you have done. And, without further ado, I want to jump right into it. First of all, let's go back to, I think this was December, when you wrote about Musk making a mess of Congress. Tell me what you think about President Elon Musk.
Yes, that's a common moniker for him. He's been, flexing his muscles of, never more so than back a few weeks ago before Congress adjourned for the year when they were, trying to prevent a government shutdown. Speaker Mike Johnson had negotiated this big continuing resolution, sort of a continuing resolution on steroids. It's a stopgap measure, but they had added a whole lot of other things that lawmakers in both parties wanted to get passed before the end of the year. And, of course, it mushroomed to, I forget now, but it was, several hundred or 1,000 or 2 pages. And, of course, that's always a problem for people who judge these bills by their page counts. And so Musk sort of joined the resistance, sort of, and began campaigning on X against this bill. And then, Trump followed suit, although Trump's opposition at that point was fairly anticlimactic because Republicans were already turning on it just based on Elon Musk's a very vocal and very aggressive opposition, vowing to basically use his considerable money to primary or go after anyone who supported it. So this bill collapsed. They ended up passing a shorter a smaller version of the same bill and prevented a government shutdown. The question is now, of course, is that, is Elon Musk getting too big for his britches, so to speak, and will he lose favor with Donald Trump, who famously does not like to be upstaged? Democrats, I think, probably smartly have been trying to, drive a wedge between them by calling him President Musk and by suggesting that because of his far greater wealth than the actual president-elect, that he is more powerful than him. And so we'll see if Trump sticks with him or whether he becomes...
Can the bromance last? That's what inquiring minds want to know.
Right. Because we know that people who are close to Trump oftentimes don't last very long. Anthony Scaramucci, the communications director, who lasted about 13 days, could tell you about that. So that's going to be one of the big subplots, I think, over the next couple of months.
Well, I thought it was really interesting. First, Trump, after Elon Musk, tweeted, this is a terrible bill. And then everybody, the Republicans, folded. And then, as you say, belatedly, I think it was an hour or two afterwards, Trump was kind of like, yeah, what he said. And then there was the famous post about, I love Elon Musk. He's great. But, he's got to stay in his lane, which I thought, ooh, we're seeing a little bit of tension there. Because, when you get two very powerful narcissists together, I just can't believe that is going to be a relationship that lasts. But though I do think Donald Trump is going to be in a bit of a quandary because he loves Elon Musk's money. Ooh, he doesn't. How can he get rid of him and make him be quiet and still get the checks? I think that's going to be something that Donald Trump contemplates. I think he's going to put up with more than he would from somebody who doesn't bring that kind of support to the table. But I believe, and tell me what you think, Russell, that there is a limit. If this really turns into Elon Musk seeming to call the shots, I think this is going to get ugly.
Yeah, I think most people, I think, believe that, just knowing Trump and his proclivities and his sensitivities. It's going to be really, you're already seeing a little bit with, and this, happening in the weeks since that bill was briefly debated and came to a conclusion with this issue of H-1B visas that kind of popped up over the holidays, where you have Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, the head, the two heads of DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, which obviously we don't know how impactful that will be, but they are standing up for sort of these, oftentimes tech-related immigrants, we're not talking about, standing up for certain kinds of immigration, and then clashing with, the sort of real MAGA nativists who really do not want are not fond of any kind of legal or illegal immigration. And of course, you have this divide in the Republican Party still, between people who say, look, we're trying to stamp out illegal immigration, get control of the southern border, but we still like legal immigration. Maybe we want to reduce it a little bit. Maybe we want to, adjust the controls a bit, but we're not anti-all immigration. But then you clearly have a cohort of people who are nativist, you might call them racist, depending on their specific beliefs, who really are opposing any legal or illegal immigration. And so we'll see to what extent that becomes a flashpoint involving Trump, involving Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, the sort of junior partner here. And then, of course, there's the big first piece of legislation or pieces of legislation that they are considering or starting to get a handle on that will maybe extend the tax cuts and address the border and address energy. Republicans are already fighting in Congress over whether to do one bill or two bills, but where will Elon Musk come down on that, and could that be a point of tension at some point?
Yeah. I want to also make sure we touch on your most recent writing, at least that I'm aware of, which is your article on Mike Johnson. Now, my understanding was that Hakeem Jeffries made it clear that the Democrats were not going to bail Mike Johnson out. If he was going to continue as Speaker, it had to be with his Republican votes. And I know Tom Massey decided that he was going to run for Speaker, but let's face it, Massey's kind of an outlier. He's kind of he's quirky. Let's just leave it at that. I don't think that opposition was taken too seriously. And Mike Johnson did win the re-election to continue on as Speaker, but it was a squeaker. And what you write about how that bodes for the future of at least the next year or two. Talk about that if you would.
Sure. Well, this is supposed to be the easy part, right? Which is the first.
There is no easy part anymore, Russell.
Of course, you're right. The first vote that the House takes in the beginning of each Congress every 2 years is before they can do anything else, they have to elect a speaker. And these, for years and years, were formalities. They're party line votes. The Republicans vote for their person, the Democrats vote for their person, and whoever has the majority elects their nominee. Of course, we saw 2 years ago Kevin McCarthy voted ill for him, of course, because it took him 15 votes to get to be Speaker, and then he only lasted 9 months before they ousted him. Now we have his successor, Mike Johnson, and the Republicans in this new Congress that just started less than a week ago, they have a smaller majority, it was already razor thin in the last 2 years, and now it's slightly smaller, and he could lose. He needed to get all but, I think, one person, depending on how people voted, whether they voted present or for another candidate. And as the roll call was going, the roll call is done for this vote where everybody stands up individually and says who they're voting for. A number of, I believe, 6 Republicans were in the chamber and refused to vote at all during this first round. And 3 Republicans, including Thomas Massey, who you mentioned from Kentucky, voted against Johnson, so that before the vote was even over, he had lost 3 votes, was 6 votes, another 6 votes short. So it looked like this was Kevin McCarthy all over again. Then those 6 members, they ended up voting for him in the sort of when they called the names again. So he got those. And then he persuaded 2 of the 3, not Massey, but the other 2 members. It took more than, I think, nearly an hour. Apparently, Trump was on the phone to them at one point, reportedly, and before they closed the vote, they went up to the front of the well of the House and changed their votes to vote for Johnson, and he squeaked by with the minimum required 218 votes. And so, if it took him this much effort just to win the job, we're talking their big bill is going to be it's going to be thousands of pages, most likely. It's going to deal with trillions of dollars of spending cuts, taxes, and that's before it ever gets to the Senate, of course. And so it's going to be really a heavy lift, and we're, as we say, it's going to be quite interesting to see if they can actually get anything through the House, given how small their majority is.
And Donald Trump said recently that he wants one big, beautiful bill that is going to have much of his legislative agenda in it, and he wants it taken up during reconciliation, despite the fact that some of what he wants in that bill are things that cannot be voted on during the reconciliation process. So Mike Johnson's going to have not only his work cut out for him with dealing with the Republicans, but also dealing with the president who really doesn't understand government at all. At all. And I don't think his one big, beautiful bill is going to happen.
Right. And it, again, in terms of, we're talking about what is ominous and what might bode ill for them, is they can't even, right now it's still early, obviously. He hasn't even taken office, although the new Republican majorities have taken office. They can't even decide whether they're going to do this in one bill or separate it out, do the border stuff first, and then try to extend his tax cuts. And they're looking to Trump for leadership, and he has all these meetings, including one either this morning or yesterday, and after every one he's like, you figure it out, I don't care, whatever gets my agenda through, which shows that he took very little interest in the nuts and bolts of congressional procedure in his first term, and he seems like he's going to take even less interest in that in the second term. And I think he basically his attitude is, you tell me who I need to call to tell them to vote for something, and that's where how involved he wants to be. I don't think he wants to be involved where he has to be making these decisions himself. And meanwhile, because the Republican Party in Congress does not have strong leaders, Mike Johnson is clearly not a powerful speaker at this point. And then in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, who was a very powerful Senate leader, whatever else you want to say about him, he's a member of the Senate. He's no longer the majority leader or the minority leader. You have John Thune, who's just starting out as the new majority leader. We don't know. It doesn't seem like he leads with an iron fist, so to speak, or even a Nancy Pelosi style of strong leadership. So there might be a vacuum, and that's where they're looking to Trump, because he does, more than any of the recent Democratic presidents, he can get his party in line when he wants to, it seems like. But he has to actually, roll up his sleeves and get in there if he wants to.
I've only seen 1 or 2 interviews with Thune since he was elevated to lead the majority in the Senate. And I was told maybe not to put so much stock in it, because I was like, the guy didn't seem, because he was originally talking about the idea of, taking a recess so that Trump could just get all of his cabinet appointments named. And Thune said, well, I really think the regular process should be in place. But he was looking down away from all the reporters and cameras. He was speaking almost to himself. And I thought to myself, either this guy is really uncomfortable in front of reporters, or this guy really doesn't have much oomph to him, much passion. But I've talked to some people who say, well, you can't. No, that's just how he is. You've been on Capitol Hill covering people for years. Should I just not expect John Thune to be a great speaker or a great communicator, but that doesn't mean that he's wishy-washy?
Well, I think he is a good communicator. He's been doing this now for 20 years. He goes on TV a fair amount. He's smooth. He's genial. He gets along with reporters. He's very not in the Trump style. He's not combative. He's not mean in any way. I don't think I've ever heard him personally insult a reporter or really any other politician, Democrat or Republican. He is, I think, more friendly and likable than Mitch McConnell, who is, famously fairly terse and, he never said more than he wanted to say. Soon, though, it's unclear how he's going to manage these constituencies, right? Because in the Senate is the last bastion of at least mild Republican resistance to Trump, right? There are still some senators who prioritize the Senate's prerogatives, who are institutionalists, who don't want him to just run roughshod over the Senate. And so Thune has to deal with that because those are the people who elected him leader. But he also has to deal with the Trump loyalists, who now make up, maybe around half of the Republican conference in the Senate, and he has to deal with Trump himself. And so I think those were some of his very early comments regarding the possibility of, them recessing to get Trump's nominees through. That whole thing seems to have been dropped, which I think is a sign that there are some limits to how much the Republican Party is just going to sort of stand aside and make Congress effectively irrelevant or make the Senate effectively irrelevant. We'll see as they go through these nominations whether that is true or not. But so far, there have been a couple of minor skirmishes where, Trump has not been completely victorious.
No, definitely not. A.k.a. Matt Gaetz, though Hegseth seems to be hanging on long past by his sell date. Russell, we need to take a quick break. Russell Berman covers politics for The Atlantic magazine. He not only covers what is going on now, he's apparently something of a historian. One of his recent articles is about Grover Cleveland, and we'll explain what Grover Cleveland has to do with Donald Trump when we come right back after this.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Every weekday afternoon from 2 to 5 p.m. on WCPT 820.
Russell Berman writes about politics for The Atlantic, but one of his recent articles was an article that talked a lot about former President Grover Cleveland. He and Donald Trump have something rather significant in common. Well, except not their policies. That's not what we're talking about. Russell, talk about the president, as your article was titled, The President Trump is Pushing Aside.
Well, for more than a century, Grover Cleveland, the nation's 22nd and 24th president, was the only person to win a term, serve a term, get booted out in his bid for re-election, and then come back and reclaim the office 4 years later. And so Trump obviously is now the second person to do that. And so there's actually a very, very small Grover Cleveland presidential library museum about 20 miles west of New York City in Caldwell, New Jersey. And so I went out there to talk to the keepers of Grover Cleveland's flame, so to speak, about how they feel about this is his main place in history. There are some other things that have largely been lost to history that happened in his 8 years, but in office. But he's known as the only president for presidential historians or trivia buffs, or even the kids who are looking at the placemats in the restaurants that have all the president's names. Grover Cleveland's the only one who skips a term and came back. And so the Grover Cleveland people are, they're not really that thrilled about him sharing the limelight with Trump. They don't want to be political. They're not really criticizing Trump, so to speak, but I think they liked that Grover Cleveland had this distinction, and Trump is such a polarizing figure, so they're not entirely comfortable with them being linked in history as they are now.
No, absolutely not. I mean, I wonder what Grover Cleveland would have said if his Supreme Court had said, well, in certain instances, a president does have immunity. They can pretty much do whatever they want. I don't think Grover Cleveland would have been happy about that. He believed that presidential power should have limits, and silly him. If only he were working the circuit today.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the interesting thing, is one of the reasons why it's difficult for them to talk about, the connection between Grover Cleveland and Trump, is because aside from this one thing, they really don't have anything else in common at all, other than they were both quite portly men physically. But Grover Cleveland, as you mentioned, he had a restrictive view of presidential authority. He opposed expansionism. My colleague had a big article about sort of him and when the United States was going to take over Hawaii, he was resistant to that. Trump, of course, wants to buy Greenland and retake over the Panama Canal. Cleveland was known for being really, he was opposed to corruption. He fought against Tammany Hall and Tammany Hall style politics and patronage. Trump is now, of course, naming all of his in-laws to, ambassadorships and that kind of thing. He flouted ethical norms left and right in his first term as well. So they are different in that respect. And even on the one issue that is, kind of re-emerged after a period of dormancy in the political debate, which is tariffs. Tariffs were a big deal in the late 1800s when Cleveland was president and running for president. And, of course, they are again because Trump loves them. But Cleveland at the time was opposing or fighting to reduce tariffs. And, of course, Trump wants bigger and more tariffs. So even on that issue, they are on opposite sides. So it's interesting. It was a fun article to write.
Yeah, it's a fun article to read as well. I love reading about presidential history and frankly, any kind of U.S. history, because I think that it gives us a much more nuanced perspective on what's going on now when we see some of the ridiculous things that have gone on before. And it gives me a tiny sliver of hope. This country has seen really tough times before and come through it. And, I think we're going to have 4 years of chaos coming from the White House. And I'd like to think that we will emerge better at the other end. But if people like you keep reminding us of what's going on and what has gone on before, I think that makes my outcome more likely. So keep up the good work, Russell. I would love to share any of your articles at any time. I really enjoy your writing.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm always happy to come on, and it's always a good talk.
Yes, and there's so many of your articles we didn't even get to today. So we will definitely reach out and bother you again to come join us on the radio. Russell Berman is a staff writer at The Atlantic. We are going to take a break for news and be back with one of our regular media segments right after this.
The Thom Hartmann radio program provides all of the intelligence, information, and insight you'll need to win the water cooler wars. Weekdays 11 to 2 right here on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. You're listening to WCPT 820 because facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live.
Celebrating our power to bring about change.
Local.
Everybody has to work together.
And progressive.
I think you get the idea.
On WCPT 820.
This is our regular media segment, not to be confused with our emergency media segment that we did earlier in the week. Mark Jacob is here. He writes the Stop the Presses newsletter that you can find at stopthepresses.news. Jennifer Schulze writes for Heartland Signal. She's a longtime Chicago newswoman. And we have a lot to talk about today, but I'd like to start off with two things, guys, that have to do. By the way, Happy New Year to both of you. I should get that out of the way first. Happy New Year to both of you. This is our official segment, so it is our official first New Year segment. And I'm glad you guys are here. I want to talk about two aspects of this. First of all, I was so disgusted when I saw the headline in the Washington Post about all the far-right conspiracy theories that were being promulgated in the wake of the fires in Los Angeles. That and maybe a more of an insider kind of thing. I know I've expressed this both to you. I was watching a lot of the coverage of the fire all week long. And when things were really bad, I don't know, a couple days ago, you know, they were going to all these, CNN had all these reporters, and they were all wearing goggles and masks, and they were doing their live shots. And even with the masks, you could hear them with their microphones. You could hear them perfectly. And then they go to Anderson Cooper, who's standing on a roadway where you can see embers falling all around him. The smoke is so thick that at times he's cloudy, and he pulls off his goggles and pulls off his mask to do his live shot. And I was like, dude, you know what? We don't need to see your pretty face. We really don't. I understand that journalists get sent to dangerous places to do their reporting, but when I see a journalist who seems to be crossing the line of common sense, it really bothers me. I found his reporting, I found the fact that he was eschewing any kind of protection, it distracted me from the content of what he was saying, because I kept thinking, dude, one of these embers is going to like land on your face or your shoulders. Why are you standing there? How do you guys judge when a journalist is covering something dicey? When do you say enough is enough? Jennifer, would you like to start?
I'll take that one.
Yes.
Yes, I've been watching the coverage with an eye on that as well, and I, for the most part, actually feel like a lot of the television broadcasters have done a very good job. I agree with you. There's been a couple times where it's been like, dude, you're going to burn up in a fire. What the hell are you doing? I mean, no job is worth that. But you always see some hot shots, and whether they got in over their heads, whether they didn't have enough guidance from their employers, God forbid, I don't know how that could be the case when you work in Southern California, you know, or anywhere where there are wildfires. There should be staff meetings about that all the time, about how we do our job, right? So there should be protocols. But I have also noted most of the reporters have had masks on. In fact, I've noticed today that their masks have elevated to even stronger type, from the N95 up to those, ones that look like gas masks practically. Right. I also heard one reporter describing why he at that moment was not wearing a mask, because he said, the wind's over here, and yesterday it was over there, and now it's here. So for right now, I don't need one, but when this changes, I will put it back on. But, so I thought that was...
okay, give me your explanation. That I can understand, that I can appreciate. But, other than that, there have been times when I think that you have to be really careful. I know that everybody wants to get the greatest footage and the most exciting stuff, and I know there's a drive to do that. But I just remember we had a boss who will not be named, who didn't really know Chicago, and it was really windy one day, and he said to one of the new reporters, you're going to go out and do a live shot at the windiest spot, which we all knew at the time was like right in front of the IBM building by the river. Right. And she literally had to tie herself to the railing. The wind was so strong, she could not keep her feet. And, come on, please. Yes, it's really, really windy. That's why I'm tied to the railing right now. I'm sorry.
Well, common sense, is not everybody has it. And sometimes you don't know what's really going on, and your boss is in an office and they aren't really completely aware. But people need to, first and foremost, be mindful of their own personal safety in situations like that and say no. Say, you know what, I'm not going to go over there and do that. I'm going to do it from over here. And no, I'm not going to go outside in a raging fill in the blank. I'm going to do it from the inside. And no, I am not going to fly overhead in hurricane force wind so we get a good aerial shot. Saying no, I think, is absolutely essential. And I think there are a lot of news folks in the jobs where, gosh, if I don't really go for it, what are renewed? And there's some that are hot dogs. So it's interesting. I know for the most part, and I'm not watching wall-to-wall coverage. I'm watching quite a bit of it.
Jennifer, could you find another place to stand? Your signal's going in and out. But Mark, I want you to answer that question too about sending reporters out.
Well, I think it's a matter of the safety of the reporter, but it's also a matter of setting a good example, because you see this in hurricanes all the time, where somebody will be like being blown all over the place, and will be saying, and everyone should be staying inside in a safe place. They're not standing inside in a safe place when they tell people that. So they're setting a bad example, and they're acting as if it's the right thing to do. So I think that's one should be a consideration for how these things get covered. And I'm with you that, when Anderson Cooper, takes off his mask and all that stuff, would you suddenly think that the fire and this toxic smoke is just going to take a time out? I mean, do you think it's just going to, as long as you're on the air, we won't do anything bad to you? I mean, it's ridiculous that way. And not like, when I was, managing reporters, I did trust them to know, and we talked about this all the time. I trusted them to recognize danger, and to be that their main responsibility for them is to take care of themselves. And if they feel like they're in a place of danger, get out and not worry about whether, I'm going to be complaining that they left a scene or anything like that. I mean, that their safety is job one. And people need to do that. I mean, they need to, we used to do, I was involved in our process of sending reporters to the Iraq War. And we did extensive training on this. And, And it was even like at the level of training to where our reporter was told that when you're interviewing somebody, find a wall or a car to get behind in case shrapnel, flies. And that actually ended up potentially, preventing one of our reporters from getting harmed because they had that kind of training. So it is important for reporters to, to use good sense and to also, as I said before, demonstrate good sense to the general public who doesn't. They don't need to be, out there in the fire zone until the whole thing becomes a safe place.
Yeah, I think so too. And there is reporting, or it's actually an opinion piece in the Washington Post about the sort of conspiracy theories, the QAnonish craziness that the right is starting to spread about these fires. I mean, I had a listener text me in the other day, like, do you think, do you think this is like an attack? Do you think they were deliberately set? And I said, there's no evidence of that right now. One official early on speculated that, there was apparently a small fire started by New Year's Eve fireworks and whether or not that had anything to do with this. But the official said that there's really no way of knowing. And, now we've got 5 fires, and it's not like there's an arsonist running around. I mean, embers are blowing and fires are starting all over. Is this the world we live in now, that anytime anything happens, there's going to be an explosion of conspiracy theories? Do you think?
Yes. Yes, the answer, yes. But the thing that really is troubling to me is that it so often has kind of a political motivation, and so you've got this, they have these horrible fires, and immediately the right wing is saying, well, that's because of DEI. It's because they hired, black people and women.
My favorite one was, the fire chief is a woman. Does that make you feel safe?
Right. Well, like in the history of firefighting, with all the men running things, there weren't fires, and there weren't bad things happening. I mean, it's just so irrational, but it's politically motivated. It's ghoulish, and it's really troubling. So there's the DEI thing, and then you realize that the mayor is a Democrat, and so. In the state, went for Harris, so Trump automatically hates it, and so he hates Gavin Newsom too. So immediately it's got to be, the politicians didn't do their job, and they spread lies like, they cut their firefighting budget, that's just a plain old lie. That's not true, but it's gone around the block several times. I mean, you see it all the time on social media in the last 36 hours, and so. Joan, I feel like I'm glad the Washington Post wrote that story, and I feel like that the mainstream news media and the responsible news media are not taking seriously enough their obligation to make sure that the public understands the truth. Now, maybe they tell the truth, and maybe then the right-wing kind of propaganda media lie, and I think I do feel like the mainstream media need to be trying to fight those lies. They don't need to ignore those lies. Yeah. They need their job is for the public to be well informed. It's not for them to do their job and just let other people do horrible things. It's not. I do feel like mainstream media is, and this has been the case for since Trump began his campaign of lies 9 years ago, and. That the mainstream news media does not really feel like it's their job to undo the damage that right-wing propaganda media is causing. And my view is they do, because that's their obligation in a democracy is to do what they can to have the citizenry be informed.
Why do you think that is, Mark?
Well, I mean, it's a tough thing because, when I was Metro editor at the Tribune, somebody would report something or say something, and I'd go to the political editor and I'd say, maybe we should do a story saying why this isn't true. And the political editor understandably would say, if I spent all my time trying to knock down other people's stories, I'm not going to be writing any stories of my own. That journalists have things they want to get done, and if they're constantly distracted by having to knock down other people's lives or just undo misinformation in the general public, then they're not doing their own projects. And I think, and that's a legitimate concern, but to me, what we've seen in recent years is that this misinformation is having a great effect. It's the reason that Trump got reelected, and so it's become a 5-alarm fire. I mean, it's become something you have to do. You have to go after this misinformation, and the thing about it is it's not just confused or deluded people. It's people with an evil agenda. I mean, that's what's going on here. You saw what happened with the New Orleans terrorist attack. Immediately that was blamed on immigrants, even though it had nothing to do with immigrants. Immediately, that was the messaging out of Fox News and Trump. And then you have these wildfires in Los Angeles, and it's like, oh, good, we have a disaster. Let's find someone we can blame to further our own political ends. It's ghoulish is the word for it. It's creepy. It's indecent. It's just terrible behavior.
Jennifer, I think we've got Jennifer somewhere where the signal's a little stronger. You want to weigh in on this whole misinformation, disinformation, particularly as it relates to these fires and the gains that I guess Republicans or conservatives think that they can achieve? I mean, they've got to feel that there's some sort of outcome that they desire by spreading all this misinformation. Nope. No, Jen, we can't hear you.
Yes.
There you are. There you are.
Hey,
yay!
I'm back.
She's back.
We missed you.
I missed you too. Tech services, though, has been right on it.
Oh, excellent. I won't ask which family member that is. Mark was talking.
No, Lady B. She's been getting me together.
Oh, good. She's really good at that. Yeah, she's really good at that.
Yeah.
So Mark was just weighing in about the fact that despite a longstanding reluctance to do journalism that corrects misinformation or corrects the reporting of others, that this seems to be an unusual time that where that sort of thing should be a goal of the mainstream media.
How do you feel about that?
Hello?
We're here.
I've lost you again.
You can't hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I can't hear you.
Okay. You know what? Let's take a real quick break.
I don't know what's happening.
And maybe we can figure this out during the break. Jennifer, Mark, and I, hopefully all three of us will be back right after this.
Dive deeper into the heart of the news and stories at WCPT 820 and across the Midwest by checking out our website, heartlandsignal.com.
It's the coverage I can count on every time.
For the latest news updates, in-depth analysis, compelling stories, comprehensive election coverage, live streams, and thought-provoking opinions, head to heartlandsignal.com.
When I need to know, they're there.
They keep me informed and updated wherever I am.
Stay informed with WCPT 820, your go-to source for where facts matter. WCPT Replay.
The thing that I'll ask that you guys do is to pass on what we're doing to someone out there that needs support, that needs help, that needs a bright light. That's one of the things that you guys can do to help make this transition in this next direction on any level, local, regional, national, international, as I always say, a little bit easier for somebody. I can promise you that there's somebody out there that may not be listening to this show or may not have streamed anything on our station or any of our broadcasts just yet. But if you share it with somebody, golly, what can that do to help strengthen our platform? Not just the CPT platform, but that in the broader sense of progressive, liberal, democratic ideas.
Keep listening to WCPT 820 because facts matter.
Alexa, play WCPT.
WCPT from TuneIn.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I believe Lady B and Jennifer have found a way that everyone can hear everyone. Jennifer, can you hear me?
Yes.
Test.
Test. 1, 2, 3.
Maybe
Yes.
it's the question. Maybe the universe doesn't want you to answer or weigh in on the idea that the mainstream media needs to spend part of their time not just reporting original stories, but correcting bad reporting. Thoughts on that?
Oh, yes. I've been thinking a lot about this lately. I think that there's a whole new, I hate to sound too insider baseball, but I think there's a whole content vertical waiting to happen for mainstream media. I feel like there's not enough attention to bad information. And there's some people who do a really good job of it, but not within major media organizations. And just once in a while, you'll get a fact check on something from the New York Times or Washington Post or CNN, but that's usually Trump said this and that wasn't true. I think we need more, something's going on, and it is not good, and it is getting worse by the minute. And we know already that right-wing propaganda dominates the media ecosystem. And so that means all of this bad information is out there. And more of us that believe in facts and all that, I think, have an obligation to start talking about it in a more serious and regular way. There's Julia Jeske. You guys may know her and follow her. She does Decoding Fox News. The poor woman watches Fox News every day, records it, and analyzes it. And several times a week puts out a podcast and a Substack and posts on social media where she'll take segments and analyze them and then present the facts. Honestly, I feel like we should have been doing that about Fox News across many media outlets for years, and maybe they wouldn't have become the behemoth that they are. But yes, I do think that that's a new area. It's not fact checking; it's something else.
Did you say she's on Substack?
Mm-hmm. It's called Decoding Fox News.
Huh. And she's on social media too, so
social media.
It's really excellent. Jennifer, what I particularly like is when reporters go and find the source of the misinformation. With the dogs. Yeah, and sometimes it's hard, but I think they did track down where the dogs and cats being eaten in Springfield, Ohio thing came from, and it was just some stupid Facebook post by somebody who didn't know what they were talking about. But the bad actors seize on anything like that and turn it into reality or their version of reality. But it's really important, I think, to document what the facts are, but also to just find where the misinformation was born in the first place.
Well, it's a different kind of investigative reporting, and that's why I say I think it's a whole nother area for mainstream media and individual journalists. I think the finding where the information sprung up from, and almost every time it's some anonymous person or bot saying something on social media and other people grab onto it, and it builds and builds and builds, and then it becomes something that Fox News is talking about. And then, like a wildfire, I hate to use that analogy, but it's accurate, it jumps over to mainstream media, and then it becomes part of the conversation. So there's a couple of things I think that need to happen. Yes, once it gets to that point, some backtracking to how did we get here? But then as you see those things building and becoming a thing, I think there's also a stage where more mainstream credible sources should say, this is happening and this this is what we know about it right now, and this is not true. Like, stop it or grab it and report on it, before it becomes a five-alarm fire.
Right,
Again,
right.
Apologies for all the fire analogies.
Yeah, but there's also a term called pre-bunking. Like debunking,
yes.
Except you're doing it before it actually gets out there. You're anticipating the lie in effect, and you're putting massive amounts of truth telling, you're investing at that to make the lie less effective that you're anticipating, and that involves it's tricky, but I think that's a really interesting concept.
So here's an example of something I think that's happening right now. There's a lie, let's call it that, going on around the California fires about there not being water in the reservoirs, and that's why these fires are bringing out of control. And, of course, it's a Democratic conspiracy, et cetera, et cetera. It started 3 days ago with the failed Los Angeles mayor candidate. I think his last name is Caruso, but I could be wrong about that. He said that on a radio show somewhere. It jumped from right-wing account to right-wing account. And today, 3 days later, it's in the CNN fact check. One of the mistakes I think mainstream media makes is that they wait for those kinds of things to sort of, they're out of control, and then they write a story about them. But the damage is already done. The story is already out there. So right when these things start bubbling up, I think more attention needs to be paid because we know the playbook. Mm-hmm. We know what's happening. You should assume if you start to see something get repeated across these various accounts that are always the bad actors, and the minute it hits the Elon Musk account, that it's, a five-alarm fire. Again, apologies. And that's when I think the media should be saying, okay, this is what we know. So today there's a fair bit of fact-checking about it, but not enough because half the country is going to think it's true.
Hold that thought. We've got to take a break. We are talking about the media with Jennifer Schulze and Mark Jacob. We're going to continue right after this.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
We were just talking about disinformation and misinformation and the mainstream media's obligation to correct that. For instance, Donald Trump posting on his social media that there is no money in FEMA. What is Joe Biden leaving me? Thanks, Joe. Not that we would expect facts or truth from Donald Trump, but that's just part of the problem. And I don't see. Do you think the current iteration of the Washington Post, which killed a political cartoon, killed a Kamala Harris endorsement, do you think this Washington Post is going to do what the Washington Post of a few years ago did and start counting the number of lies that President Trump tells?
I've been wondering about that. I've been waiting to see if they're going to make an announcement about anything or if it's just going to happen. My guess would be they will not do that.
No, that would be too confrontational, too adversarial. And the sad thing is that the real truth is that the news media has to be adversarial against politicians and has to take them to task when they lie or when they do bad things. And with Trump, he's lying all the time. It's part of the job is to get at the truth when he lies. And so I wish they would do a count. I don't think they will do it. And I think that one of the things that I really worry about is that as he becomes president again, they're going to decide that they have to just air his lies without any interruption. You saw him; he gave up that news conference of over an hour a day or two ago, and it was just full of lies, just full of just garbage lies, things that were just not true, and they just let it run, and somewhere later they probably caught up to some of them, but there was no attempt at real-time fact-checking, which is entirely possible. I mean, I've suggested ways they could do it, but nobody wants to do it because that would look too confrontational, and so they're going to let the President of the United States lie as much as he wants to.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that Jeff Bezos seems to think that when Donald Trump and Elon Musk have their breakup, that maybe he can get Blue Origin into some more government contracts because, the day before that he killed the Kamala Harris endorsement, Donald Trump visited, I think, a Blue Origin facility. And, the richest people in the world who should have the least to fear and be best equipped to resist, they are the ones who are capitulating to Trump left and right. I know that we had our emergency media session, but does Mark Zuckerberg really think that people believe that taking away the content moderation in areas like immigration and LGBTQ, we know that's going to open them up to hate speech? And is he really serious that he's going to sell that as free speech? I don't know.
Well, go ahead, Jennifer.
Sorry, Winston's weighing in. Sorry about the dog barking.
That's okay. We love to hear from Winston.
I just wanted to say that did you see that where Zuckerberg said that people who quit his platforms were virtue signaling? I mean, that just blew me away. They're just virtue signaling. Well, number one, when did virtue become a bad thing? I just don't quite understand that. And isn't that just the market acting the way it's supposed to in a free enterprise system? That people who get disgusted with products decide not to patronize the people who make those products. And, it's those virtue signaling. Well, we should have virtues. And his only virtue seems to be making more money. So I'm not admiring that. It's just not only is he doing a bad thing with this, no more fact-checking stuff, but now he's just being haughty about it, as if there was some sort of moral high ground to not checking facts anymore.
Jennifer, you want to jump in?
Yes, and, I think that the fact-checking thing is terrible, but I also think there was a smokescreen effect here, right? He did that whole big announcement, but really what they did without any announcement was they changed all of the standards for what they will and they will not do in great detail and didn't brag about it. That evening, it started coming out about what the language and attacks and threats be on this platform. It goes way beyond this notion of fact-checking. In some respects, there was some brainwashing going on. There was
Jennifer, we're losing you again. I don't know what's happening. There must be a solar flare or something. We're due for a break anyway. Let's take a break and see if we can strengthen that signal, and we'll be right back after this.
Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Conclusion of our media segment, and I believe, Mark, that Jennifer has decided that the solar flares win today, and she has thrown in the towel. Next time, we tried to also get her on Clean Feed, but we had some problems getting some sound on that as well. So it's just going to be you and me, kiddo. But we only have one more segment, so you don't have to worry that I'm going to exhaust you here. I do want to talk about in general how the coverage of Donald Trump has been so far. I think my personal opinion is that he's getting more coverage than somebody who hasn't even gotten sworn in deserves. And I think that the media should be learning a lesson right now that they should have learned the last time around. Donald Trump may not be a well-educated guy. Yeah, he's went to school, but according to his niece, he had a lot of people go to class for him and take his tests for him. He may not be a guy who reads. During his first administration, when he was getting presentations, people found that they needed to bring pictures and charts for him to look at because he wasn't going to read the words. But he is brilliant when it comes to understanding the media and media manipulation. And it drives me crazy that there are legitimate news outlets that are still talking about, well, we should take this. He might invade Greenland. We better take this seriously. He is a master of giving the media clickbait so that, every time there's a story about Greenland or the Panama Canal, there's one less story about the Jack Smith reports that Donald Trump is doing his darndest to get suppressed. There's one less story about his legal troubles and whether or not he's going to be sentenced tomorrow. And it drives me insane that it's like they're falling for it again. He's chumming the waters, and man, they're just going for it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it is this kind of human wave tactic. He puts so much out there that nothing has any particular impact, and everything's diluted. I get that. But we're kind of in a trick bag, I think, Joan, because if he says he wants to invade other countries and we just laugh it off, we're in a bad situation too. I mean, that's serious stuff. He's going to be president of the United States in charge of the most powerful military in the entire world. And if he says he's going to invade other countries, I think it needs to be reported. Now, the difficulty is that what you don't need to do is say, well, there could be good reasons why he wants to steal Greenland from Denmark and stuff like that. I mean, we have seen some stories that say, well, here's the logic behind Donald Trump's statement about Greenland. No, I think he's just kind of a madman who's a Putin kind of puppet who wants to just steal other people's countries. So I get that. But let's have a discussion for a couple minutes about this because do you feel like that the Greenland thing shouldn't have been covered, or do you think that I think
it should have been reported, but it's been like a story every day. And let's get somebody else to weigh in on what that means. And let's report on, what the Danish Commonwealth is doing. And now let's take a look at, Don Jr. went to Greenland. It doesn't need to be a story every day.
Right. Well, they know how to put on a show. That's the thing. I mean,
yes,
it's what you were saying. I mean,
like Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland. Hey, kids, let's put on a show.
Let's put on a show. Let's send Don Jr. to Greenland.
Exactly.
And supposedly, you see, there's a report that they had to hire unhoused people to pose for a picture with him, to waving the American flag. It's in Greenland. So they know that's the thing they're so good at, is they know how to create product, and the news media needs product, and they prefer product that somebody else creates. That somebody just hands them and they just can write it up and put it on the air or put it in the newspaper, rather than them going out and doing an enterprise story that requires a lot of creativity and also hard work.
Yeah.
So, there is that going on. And no, it shouldn't diminish from the fact that there is a big fight over whether the Jack Smith report is going to get out there. And it certainly is important that it should. I mean, obviously, Trump is trying to cover up his crimes, as, he always is. And also this whole issue of him trying to avoid being sentenced tomorrow for the New York hush money thing, which There's no legitimate issue for the U.S. Supreme Court to deal with here. That's ridiculous. It was a state charge. It was handled in state courts. It's this idea that you're going to give somebody presidential immunity before they're even president. That's insane. The presidential immunity ruling itself was insane. This is like double insane if they're going to accept Trump's argument that he has immunity before he even becomes president. And for something he did when he wasn't president, he was convicted when he wasn't president, and he did it when he wasn't president. So, come on. But we're about to, we're waiting for to see if the Supreme Court is going to do anything. It could happen any minute now. Whether, and then you had this conversation that Trump had over the phone with Alito. What do you think about that? That hasn't gotten enough coverage.
That's what bothers me. Unethical. I feel when they throw the clickbait out there, we lose out on the coverage of the stuff that we really need to be paying attention to. And I believe with 100% of my heart that that's exactly what Trump intends. He is a master manipulator. Supposedly in 2014, when he was meeting with, various consultants about how viable a run for the presidency would be, he supposedly, and this was reported, that he said to the consultant, well, if I run, I know I've donated to a lot of Democratic causes, but if I run, I'll run as a Republican because those people are stupid and I'm more likely to be able to make headway as a Republican than as a Democrat. This guy has street sense, no business sense, no political sense, no common sense, but he has street sense.
And he knows how to express racist and sexist code through the media. Mm-hmm. That's I think that's another one of the main reasons he won is because he was able to signal to people in a way that to them didn't feel racist, but still kind of it hit the racist bone in their body. Mm-hmm. Where they. It hit the white privilege thing and the male privilege thing while not seeming to be that, or they could tell themselves that's not what they were doing, but that's what they were doing.
Oh yeah. Absolutely, without question.
That is a skill. This is a guy who is.
But isn't the media supposed to be smart enough? If you and I can see this. Why can't the editors of the Washington Post and the New York Times and, ABC, NBC, CBS, why do they just not care when they're getting played as long as the story gets attention and gets eyeballs? Maybe that's it. Maybe nobody cares.
Well, number one, they have to produce product. They have to, as we used to say in the newspaper business, we got to feed the monster every day. Mm-hmm. So you had to have something to put in the newspaper, and he gives you something. I wrote a biography of Abe Saperstein, the guy who started the Harlem Globetrotters, who was a master at this. He would go to sports writers and he would just, have his own opinion on new rule changes and all this other stuff. He knew that they had giant spaces to fill every day, and he was going to help them fill it. And the same thing is happening with Trump and political news today. And the news media falls for it because the news media needs it. They need that fresh material.
What was it? Was it Les Moonves who was the one who was attributed to, Donald Trump may be bad for the country, but he's great for CBS News? Yeah. Wasn't that Les Moonves?
Yeah, it was. It was, for CBS. Yeah, and which is true. But at least for a while it was. It would be true until he starts arresting people at CBS or making them or closing down the network. He keeps on threatening the news media, and I bet it works in a lot of ways. It seems like it's worked for ABC with that settlement they made on the Stephanopoulos thing.
Yeah.
It's just weird.
Though, as far as the settlement, the defamation settlement that ABC agreed to on behalf of Stephanopoulos, using the word rapist in a discussion about Trump. Mm-hmm. I read a legal scholar was writing about it, and apparently there was an early court ruling that really went against ABC, And, the judge in the ruling said, he didn't just say rapist once, he said it like 20 times. And the way the decision was worded, it did not bode well. And I read, now maybe this was somebody just trying to give Bob Iger, the head of Disney, a pass, but there were reports that, they were worried that if they continued to pursue the case and they lost, that they would do more damage to the business of journalism and free speech than they would by agreeing to some kind of a settlement. I don't know if that was.
I've heard that argument. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. It was such a high bar because Trump's a public figure, and so they couldn't just say whether it was false or not. And the thing about it is that a judge had said it. So Stephanopoulos is really just repeating something a judge said. Now, whether the judge was a little over his skis when he said it is one thing. Because it's a ticklish issue whether it's sexual assault or rape, depending on the definition. But either way, Trump is a public figure, which means that he didn't have to prove that it was false. He had to prove that there was reckless disregard for the truth by ABC, and I don't see how he proves that. You would have to prove that you'd have to find emails that said, "Well, we're going to say false things about Donald Trump," or you would really have to find evidence that nobody thinks is there. So I don't know. I think that they did it just because they didn't want to be in this position of fighting Trump in court while they're trying to cover him. That's part of it. Yeah. They also, I think they felt like they would lose access to. I don't think it's just that they thought it would be an uncomfortable or awkward situation to be in, covering him and then being in a lawsuit with him, but I think they felt like they'd lose access. They wouldn't get any interviews, no exclusives, no appearances. They'd get frozen out. I think all of that was a big worry for them. It was not. I just had a lot of trouble thinking it was some sort of noble decision by ABC News.
Yeah. It's interesting because we always talk about that argument when it comes to the networks, that they don't, part of the reason why those Sunday morning news shows, why they don't get super tough with people who sit there and lie is because they don't want to lose access. When have you ever heard of a local news station saying, "Oh, we're going to go real easy on Governor Pritzker because we don't want to lose access"? Why don't they realize how desperately there are people who want the kind of fame and high profile that a major network can bring, So maybe Mitch McConnell gets his feelings hurt and doesn't want to go on the Sunday morning news shows anymore. There's probably a good 2,000 people who would be just as interesting and informative and would be willing to take those slots. And I don't buy that argument. I think the networks are selling themselves short when the argument is, "Oh, well, we can't be too tough on them or we'll lose access." I think politicians need the networks more than the networks need the politicians, but that does not seem to be a popular view.
I think that's true, and also let's imagine a scenario in which, like, the Republican Party freezes out Face the Nation or something. Well, what Face the Nation might want to do in that case is go out to some rural county and see how somebody on Medicaid is treated. See, like, they come in for, actually do some reporting or interview somebody who's an expert at some public policy.
Well, exactly. If the Republicans get their nose out of joint, then use your platform to promote Democrats, to promote activists. How long do you think the Republicans are going to let that go on before they demand their seat at the table again? Come on.
Right. I think you're right. I think it's unilateral disarmament by the networks when they do that.
Why are the suits so cowardly?
Well, because they're earning big salaries, and if they don't, ruffle any feathers, they can stay in there, and they have a nice, second home in the Hamptons. That's why. I'm sorry. I just think it's just cynical and selfish, and in order to actually confront dishonest politicians, you have to be tough, and you have to, because you're going to get attacked and you're going to be accused of being unfair. You have to have a suit of armor, psychologically in order to do that work. And if you don't, if you're just more interested in building your career and, and getting a really nice salary and getting a promotion, you're not going to do that. Mm-hmm. It's like any other business, unfortunately.
Yeah. Mark Jacob writes a newsletter called Stop the Presses. You can subscribe to it. You can find it at stopthepresses.news. Jennifer Schulze contributes a lot of times to our Heartland Signal op-eds. She also has a Substack called Indistinct Chatter. Hopefully we will also get her a better internet connection next time we want to meet. Mark, thank you for sticking around. Appreciate that.
All right. See you next time.
Take care. That is going to do it for me. I will see you tomorrow. Remember, it's Friday tomorrow, so the whole first half of the show, we are going to be taking your calls. We're also going to talk to political science professor Joel Ostro, get an update on Russia and Ukraine and all things Putin. Driving it home with Patty Vasquez is up next. Dwayne Kennedy's going to be sitting in with her. She's going to have Wisconsin Circuit Court Judge Susan Crawford to talk to. That'll be interesting. And don't forget that tomorrow at 6 a.m., Richard Chu starts our day. He is going to be talking to one of my favorite people, John Fugelsang, and apparently Mayor Brandon Johnson. Woo, big show tomorrow at 6 a.m. I will see you tomorrow at 2. Have a great evening. Good night.